Well, hi everyone. Today I want to talk about transitions. So we've kind of been talking about a lot of major life things, loss, disappointment, mismatched expectations. So let's talk about something that often happens when we have one of these things going on in the background: loss, disappointment, mismatched expectations. A lot of times what happens is there is a transition that is either forced because there's a loss, so there's a transition, there's disappointment. So we realize we have to make a transition, whatever it is, or there's a forced transition that needs to be made. And while this can vary how we react to it, depending on if it's in our personal life or our professional life, I think there are some key concepts that apply whether we are dealing with transition in our personal or professional life. Again, I have lots of clients that, especially with professional transitions, and it may actually be maybe they're transitioning, and that's a whole other thing to talk about, but also transitions about they're getting a new boss or something's changing in their work environment that they feel is going to affect them. At home, it can be lots of transitions. It can be our kids growing up, our kids moving out, something happening with a partner. So many transitions to think about. So I just have three or four kind of key points when you're dealing with transition. So the first one is, especially for us kind of type A leaning individuals, is talking about goals and a plan. So, of course, it's really important to me to say what my goals are every single day. And again, remember, if we go back to the goal module or the goal talk, these are like the big kind of life goals, not what I plan to accomplish during the day, but big life goals. And so now when you're going to have a transition, sometimes it's very helpful. It can seem very overwhelming. So, really having sort of a transition plan. So, writing out some goals of what are the things that you need to accomplish and prioritizing those and delegating what needs to be done. So here's like the top 5 things I need to get done this week. And then next week, I'm going to focus on these parts of the transition. And then next week, I'll focus on these parts of the transition. This I'm going to delegate to someone to do. And then you may have to look at it and reprioritize as you go through. But I think it really helps a lot of us to have a solid plan or to have a goal. Okay, I know X is happening on this date. So I'm going to make a backwards timeline from that date of the transition to all the things that need done. So that can really help. I think number 2 is having a support system. Depending on how big the transition is, you want to have a support system. If it's a professional transition, remember that you have to be careful who you're going to rely on. The whole phrase is lonely at the top. It's very hard to vent up. You don't want to be venting up to people that you report to. You don't want to be venting down. You have to be careful about venting to peers. So sometimes this is where having those outside networks of colleagues can really come in handy if you need to be doing some venting or some work around a professional transition. For personal transitions, again, we're going back to our support systems, our good friends, our family. Maybe it's our animal that's one of our supports during a time of transition. But it's really important to do that self-care and have a support system in place depending on what that transition is that you're looking at. And then finally, again, this is kind of something that can be hard for a lot of us who are type A and a little bit of control freaks. I mean, I'm not a control freak. Okay. Anyway, is actually being a little bit flexible, a little adaptable, a little go with the flow. The words go with the flow. And sometimes I'm going to say just irk me to my core. I know I should be able to go with the flow, but it's very hard for me too. I want to plan everything out. I want to know what's going to happen in a month from now, 2 months from now, 6 months from now, and maybe even 6 years from now. But there are times in our life, and transition is one of those times when we can't go, we can't plan it all out. We have to actually just succumb to going with the flow and taking each day as it comes and getting one day done and then moving on to the next day. And then maybe once we've gotten those goals done that we need to do to get through this transition and we're kind of through it, then we can start maybe looking ahead a little bit and thinking about things. But when you're in that big transition, whatever that may be, that's not the time. Going with the flow is the way to go, as much as it hurts me to say that to you. It's true. Okay. So 3 things for transition: have goals, have your transition plan, do that backwards timeline, figure out what you need to accomplish by then. Number 2, have a support system. If it's at work, something professional, you may want that support system to be outside the people in your immediate circles. Can't vent up, can't vent down. Careful about doing it with colleagues. If it's a personal transition, then having your friends and family close, your pets, whatever makes you happy, whatever's your support system. And then finally, remembering to keep that self-care and to keep that flexibility open and going with the flow until you're a little bit over that transition and have that new way. Remember, we are very habit-oriented creatures. And so we will keep a bad habit, a bad plan, even if it doesn't serve us, because change is so daunting to us. So transition is a time to kind of re-examine those things, and maybe doing something a new way with a new person, or without a new person, whatever the case may be, is going to be the best next thing for you. You've got to be open-minded for that, and you've got to be able to go with the flow and see how things work. So that's my message to you for today about transitions, and we'll be back next week with something else. All right, bye-bye.